Hi, I am here with Hana Kamea Kemble, and she is a certified Laban Bartenieff movement analyst who graduated from integrated movement studies in 2004. And the reason we are talking today is because she is the director of the Moving Child films, but she's also done so many other cool things and holds really sort of important leadership roles, including being a board certified dance movement therapist, a registered somatic movement therapist, and the director of the Movement Arc. And we are talking to her today about this, her work of directing and creating 3 films on human motor development in children. And so these films are available. We'll get to all that in a minute. But Hana, can you just tell us first about sort of what the biggest picture is about these films?
Sure, and I'll just start by saying hello out there to all of my IMS colleagues, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for having me here today. So the films, there's 3 films. There's the Moving Child 1, supporting early development through movement. Moving Child 2, which is dance therapy in action. And then there's the Moving Child 3 film, which is developmental movement in the first year of life. And the goal with the films originally for me was to make a very short, 15, 20-minute DVD, just helping parents understand developmental movement and how to support their children from a young age. But as we began to interview people and travel around North America, filming people also working with children, mainly dance therapists and also CMAs, CLMAs, we just got really excited and then that grew from there. And because I also love to reach, I'm a reacher, we ended up interviewing over 30 people all over North America, basically. And then sort of sorting through those interviews to find our story and putting that first film together, which goes through age 0 to 7. As you mentioned, some aspects of motor development, but also distinguishing movement development and looking at dynamic movement. What is that? Why is it important? And looking at attachment, bonding from in utero through birth, all the way through with examples of movement therapists working in schools. So that was the main goal, was to educate parents, caregivers of children, and bring our work in movement analysis and movement therapy more into the world. So yeah, have it be better understood.
So now I'm curious, in the creation of the films, did you make the first one and then the second 2 after that? Like, or did you
Yeah.
think of them as a whole from the beginning? How did you kind of sort through that part of the creative process?
Well, when we made the first film, we realized that we had so much other footage that we couldn't include and other people that we wanted to include that we couldn't necessarily in that story, wanting to keep it to just an hour in length. And so we did some more fundraising. We had lots of support from our community and were able to make that second film. And then after the second film was made, we also looked at the footage and thought I have a third film here. So again, did another little round of fundraising and then were able to produce that third film. I felt that these sessions with Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, the founder of Body Mind Centering, there's 3 of them that are featured in that third film, were just so special and important that I really wanted to honor her time with us and honor the potential learning for people by watching those case studies. And we had beautiful footage of Martha Eddy, Mariko Tanabe. Yeah. So it was, now I'm done. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I think I have 2 questions, and I'm going to ask them together, and you can kind of sort through how you want to answer them. My first question is, like, when you set forth in making the films, what, from your understandings of human movement, what did you really want people to get from the films? And then the second question is, in the process of making them, was there any other knowledge that kind of emerged that you were like, oh, this is so crucial too?
Interesting question. I think what I most wanted people to understand and appreciate is that there's so much involved in movement development. So it's not, most people know the very simple sort of milestones or not. Um, but I wanted people to have an appreciation of how hard babies are working, how much learning is going on, and also that there's all of these interconnections between physical, social, emotional development that I don't think people are necessarily aware of, just the importance of the body and all of the neurological connections that are getting made that are just imprinting us so deeply from such a young age, and that everything's workable. So that if the birth, has happened in a certain way, that maybe we can offer some support, after that, or there's a infant who's not using perhaps one side of their body, or an older child who didn't get enough time crawling, that at any point in their development, we can offer intervention, we can offer support, and we can educate parents about what they can do at home, or caregivers of children. So we, in the first film, we go into a daycare setting that happens to have a Feldenkrais consultant working with them to ensure that there's enough room to move, that children are not spending too much time in contraptions that might be inhibiting their development. So I hope I answered that first question. Can you remind me of the second question again?
Yeah, that question is there anything that came forth or emerged in the making of the films that you had to like, oh, this is really important to share too, that you kind of hadn't anticipated? So any kind of
Yes.
surprises?
Yes. Well, I think mainly the importance of movement and touch and physical connection in attachment and bonding. So when I started the film, the first film, that was in actually 2011, we were just playing around with starting to pull out a camera. I hadn't done my own training in attachment psychology and pre and perinatal attachment psychology, and which is deeply somatic work. And so while being in that training and meeting people through that, Myrna Martin is one of those trainers. He's in our first film. I just began to learn about this incredible connection between movement and bonding and attachment, and the importance of attachment for physical unfolding of our development, for emotional development, for all of it, psychological development. So really it was the interconnection of those two, movement and attachment.
Yeah, can you say just as like, because I think it is such a clear example that you're bringing forth, and it's something that's it's kind of surfacing to a more popular conversation right now. So can you like say a little bit more about what the relationship is between movement, the physical body movement, and attachment?
Yes. So when we look across species, we see the importance of the proximity of the parent to the child's body. We see the importance of eye contact. When we begin to understand ourselves as mammals, and then we look at other mammals for how they secure attachment, I think we can learn a lot from that, remember a lot from that. So the shaping of the body, for example, we know that shape is about relationship to self, object or person, environment. Shaping around children supports attachment and bonding. The way that we hold infants, the way that we as caregivers are breathing ourselves, how are we in our own nervous systems when we're with children, when we receive children. So there's so many different elements there. One of the things that we feature in the first film is a sequence of movements that are really wonderful to be supported post-birth. So a lot of people would know that as the breast crawl, but the infant can be placed on the mother's tummy, or if there's been a C-section, just above at the lower chest. And then the infant themselves will move. There's certain reflexes that are still available post-birth. They'll move like a little lizard or frog toward the breast, oriented by that sense of smell for where is the milk, where's that nourishment. There's a ton of little unfolding movements that are all about attaching, essentially. And so once we learn about those, we can support those for people to get to have in place. There's lots to say about movement and attachment. One of the things that can happen anytime there's ruptures in attachment, this is what I do with families, is some of those early attaching movements can be recreated. So I might have an older child do a game where they crawl from the feet along the legs up to the parent's chest, and then they're held and embraced there. Or they jump from a couch into the parent's arms and they are received. So some of it is about movement toward, movement away, touch, eye contact, proximity of parent. I think the biggest issue right now that I'm seeing, you're probably seeing it too, I'm sure all of our IMS graduates and students are seeing it, is just the availability of the parent's eye contact and body in terms of the amount of time being spent on cell phones and gadgets. I even noticed, my dog will be like, hey, pay attention to me. I'm here when I'm too long on the computer. So, and as Dr. Bruce Perry, psychiatrist, says in our film number 1, your presence really, truly matters. It matters neurologically as well, in terms of brain development.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I'm hearing in this is, and everything that you're saying, it connects to that while these films focus on infant through child development, that the resonance, the impact carries through our lives.
Yes.
And that even, you and I, as our time as children has passed, that there are still things that we can know both within ourselves and our adult relationships and in working with children
Yes.
that are present in the way that these relationships and the way that movement is looked at.
Yes, absolutely. And just as relevant for adults healing with other adults in relationship and couples therapy, reconnecting with family members, we can remember these physical and movement related aspects of attachment. A simple touch, can go a long way with settling the nervous system for many. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I will echo that. I have seen as touch has come back, touch protocols have softened since COVID has softened. And the desire that I see in college students and colleagues to just contact each other and to have a physical connection, a bond made, to feel your edges in relationship to other people's edges, to feel a softening or hardening, and that here sort of sensate dynamism of our relationships through touch. It's like a palpable craving.
Very much so. And I'll just tell a super quick story. When I lived in Indonesia in a small village for 4 months on an exchange program when I was 21, I went to a different village for a little visit. There was something going on there. And I had these women who I didn't know come over to me, surround me, and just start massaging my ribs. That was their way of, welcoming me to their village, connecting. I couldn't necessarily speak their language, but the language of touch went a long way. And in that particular Sasak culture, people are massaging each other all the time, men with men, women with women, parents with children, children with parents. Yeah, so it's a big important part of many other cultures.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing that. And I think the thing that I will say about having watched the films is that I watch them, the pacing of the films and the content, I watch them with the understanding of whether it's parenting, child rearing, the process of caring for the young as they become next generations, that I watch them with the understanding that these are cultural practices. There's a sort of way that we've come to understand some things that maybe we could rethink. I'm not being very articulate about this right now, but exactly what you're saying brings up that kind of the space for me to ask some questions about assumptions that I've had about child rearing. That's really present in what the films you've made.
I'm very happy to hear that. And I think there are a lot of light bulbs usually going off in people's minds and bodies as they watch the films. I've heard that feedback. And my most important message to people as they're watching the films is just everything is workable. Everything can be repatterned. Everything can be awoken, reconnected. This is part of the training in IMS that I received, is that, at any moment there's that movement potential. And where is it? And so if people didn't have these things in their childhood and they're watching the film and kind of, grieving for themselves, just to know that all of this can be brought in at any time, making time to dance. Yeah.
Going to ask you about IMS in a minute, but I will share also personally, before I was a student in IMS, when I was a freshman in college, actually, I really, really struggled as a writer. I mean, I'd sit down and I had thoughts, but the idea of taking thoughts to words on a page in coherent sentences was almost impossible to even imagine as a process. And Cadence Whittier, the late director of integrated movement studies, was my professor at the time. And she said, well, maybe you need to practice crawling. And I remember talking to my mom also about Cadence saying this, and I was like, you never crawled. And so I would actually crawl up and down the hallway of my dormitory as I was learning how to write. And I still do that when I'm stuck as a writer. And I mean, I have other practices I do too, but I really feel that they coincided. Yeah. With this ability to be like, okay, it's a thought. How do I get it on the page?
Well, we do know there's a direct correlation between cross-lateral movement and reading, writing, different academic skills. The crossing of the right-left hemisphere through that corpus callosum, aided with cross-lateral movement. Yes, so that makes sense to me. Yeah. And Dr. Carla Hannaford talks a lot about that. She's in film number 1. You met her. The brain gym folks have a lot of neat activities where you're moving your arms with your eyes, those figure eights, tracing them on your body. Yeah. I find that very helpful for adults and children.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me share that, Hannah.
Yeah, it's important. The cross-lateral movement's huge.
It's so gratifying. So Hannah, we've kind of started to get there, but when you think back to your integrated movement studies training and what transpired in these films, what about your IMS training supported the work with these films?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the IMS training was absolutely incredible. It was life-changing. I've never felt so alive and integrated during those months of moving so much all day long. I think that I was introduced to the breadth of developmental movement's importance. Moving those patterns myself was wonderful to do. And I think just the importance of dynamic movement and understanding all these different elements of dynamic movement and the correlates from the Laban Bartenieff movement analysis or study system. The power of imagery. I think also the creative systems theory really supported me in the process of making the films, and having an understanding for myself of, in which phase of that cycle do I tend to get stuck, or do I tend to struggle, and where do I need to pay attention? For me, it's around middle axis and really activating those muscles and getting that push going and just pushing through. And getting support, I would say, as well, is important. So, I think there's so much I could say about my training at IMS, which I'm so, so grateful for. But I would say it was the width and the breadth of the depth of dynamic movement. What is it? Understanding it, and really wanting to share that with the world in some way. Hence, wanting to feature many CMAs and CLMAs in the film. So, yeah.
I was thinking about that as I watched them, and wanted to ask you also about that, is who is in these films, and kind of how did you get both some of the movement experts, but also some of the families, because there's some really tender, vulnerable scenes that, yeah, how did people come to participate?
Yes. So, well, it started in Vancouver, British Columbia, since I'm from British Columbia. And some of those folks were just people I knew, people who had come to my classes or workshops. Steph and Sean, the parents that you meet, were just personal friends. She happened to be pregnant, and I said, "Hey, need a pregnant lady. Do you mind?" Um, and we had an opportunity, yeah, with various folks just in our community at that time to see, who's giving birth, who's around. Would you mind, if we can film the post-birth breast call sequence, for example? So just very grateful to all those people that were willing to give their time. It was a lot of personal connections. It was also parents who were connected to the programs that we went to film. So for example, we went to film two board certified dance movement therapists in Atlanta at Moving in the Spirit, which is a beautiful program in Atlanta, Georgia. And there were parents around. There was, grandparents and parents there. And we would just sort of go up to them and say, would you mind giving an interview? How would that be? We had filming sessions where we literally just invited 10 babies to come, put them down on the black mats and, just film their movement for half a day. So it was a variety of people who stepped forward, and also just a lot of those connections came through the experts that were involved in the film. We have occupational therapist, physiotherapist, physical therapist, child psychiatrist, movement psychologist, board certified dance movement therapist, movement analysts, a range, Feldenkrais, one person trained in. So quite a range, and I wanted that breadth of people. I wanted some different voices coming in to fill in the blanks. We had a neurophysiologist, that's Carly Hannaford, Dr. Carly Hannaford. So just a variety of experts, I guess I would say, we reached out to bring in. Yeah.
I think as I'm hearing as you list them too, it's just reminding me of the comprehensiveness of the work that you're doing that's reflected in the films. Is there's a sort of foundational seed of the Laban Bartenieff work, but it's such a beautiful model of applying the Laban work with all these branches that just support it and give it like weight and endurance and complexity that it really has.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm so grateful to everybody who was willing to participate. It was great.
It's really beautiful. So I just have two more questions as we close.
Yeah.
One is so you've done these films, and then there's always one thing that carries us into the next. So what is sort of cooking? What are you working on right now that's got some juicy creative aliveness for you professionally?
Sure. Well, the one thing I'm working on is just wanting to get the films out into the world more. So hoping that people can know they can come to the movingchild.com website and find the films there, and that the films are also available for institutional use in universities, colleges, libraries, etc., and are available through some different streaming organizations as well. So if people are interested, they can reach to us at the Moving Child. And the other project that I'm working on, which I'm super excited about, is a live show called Bumbleina. And this is me kind of returning home to myself as a mover, dancer, singer, and also wanting to bridge my inner character, whose name is Bumbleina, who's half bumblebee and half ballerina, klutzy ballerina, my background, with mental health. So myself and another colleague are creating a show. It's called Bumbleina. I performed it live last summer at a music festival with children and parents, and that was well received. So hoping to do that again this summer. And we're hoping to make a YouTube channel of that. And so it's taking inspiration from LBMS, from all the other movement work I've done in my life, and offering that back as a teaching, I guess. And basically, we don't want kids sitting in front of screens without moving. So it's going to be a lot about just getting kids moving, getting their parents moving with them, having kids sing along with songs, and inspiring them also about nature and learning about nature and learning about bumblebees and the garden of the world. So it's In the Garden with Bumbleina and Friends is going to be the name of the show. And yeah.
In the Garden with Bumbleina and Friends.
Bumbleina and Friends, yeah. And as I share that, I just would say, so wherever our IMS graduates and students are in the world, just want to support you all to be tending to that creative seed in yourself and seeing how you want to share your movement work in the world.
Yeah. And you're sharing, I mean, there are so many models, there's so many possibilities. And I am just really loving and appreciating the different forms that you have found to give your work, as well as the layers of growth. So like the films where you're sort of behind the camera, or you're directing. I mean, we do see you, to like living Bumbleina in your tissues, performing Bumbleina. And so the different also ways that our physical form engages with the work that we do in the world.
Yeah.
So Hana, my final question for today is, it's a more personal question, but what in your own moving life, where's the meat or the juice for you as a mover right now?
Yeah. Well, I think it's two things. It's whenever I notice that I'm in a more stuck, or let's say a little more less mobile place in myself, whatever that might mean. It's just simply remembering to move. And then I happen to love authentic movement, so it's just noticing how does my body want to move in that moment, kind of following that desire. And the second thing that's come up a lot recently is coming back to cellular level stillness and growing and shrinking. I guess the cellular breathing. And I just recently did a beautiful session with Annie Brooke, who was a teacher at Naropa, as a BMC teacher, kind of an amazing movement teacher in the world. And that was about finding the light in the mitochondria in the cell and finding the fluid movement, just going back to that in myself, because sometimes my nervous system will be leading and take over, right? And it's good to remember the fluids are there, and that there's a cellular level being. I'm just trying to feel that in myself right now as I talk. That is very different than the sort of sympathetic charge, let's keep going, let's get more projects done in the world. But to just bring it back, bring it down in, and make time for that parasympathetic, rest and digest, and let that inform who I am in the world. So we're going to have some rest moments and some heart talk moments in Bumbleina, where we will literally talk to our hearts, and where we will go into flexion and make our little nest at times. Yeah.
So, but I, as we talk to our hearts, I'm just getting the image too of the heart talking back.
Yes. The heart has a lot to say. We better listen. Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Help it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to remember to include that. Let's listen what it has to say. Yes. Yep.
Hana, this has been such a
moment. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for listening. And please, we'll stay connected. Please reach out if anyone would like to learn more about the films and watch them.
And all the links will be included below, as well as with the email blast. So please do. I think that these films, the Moving Child films, and your work is a gift to our field. It is a gift to future generations. It's a gift to children and the people who work with them. And I just want to encourage people to check them out, like truly check them out and be with them, and say thank you for that work. It's so vital.
Thank you, and thanks for the acknowledgement. And I'll just acknowledge everybody that made them. It was a big team. And I also just want to take a moment to acknowledge Peggy, Janice, and Ed, and Lyndon, who was part of my experience at IMS as well at that time, and Cadence, late Cadence, and late Lyndon. So thank you to all of our IMS former faculty,
Yeah.
and to you.
Yeah, the people who put the oomph behind it happening for so long and continuing to. I mean, all of our learning. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Hold on. I will edit this out.